Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Rivers Trust's 2024 annual conference, all about embracing river buffers. My name is Rebecca Duncan, and I will be taking us through proceedings today. I'm the Rivers Trust Media and Events Lead. I am ably helped by several of my colleagues who I will thank later, because I'm sure everything's going to go smoothly. A little bit later, we'll get into the content and dig into the theme of today about river buffers. But I'm going to start with the usual housekeeping points and also just a little bit of creative inspiration and hopefully also get everyone talking as well. So I'm just going to quickly switch to a different slide deck. Which I'm hoping you can all see now. So in terms of housekeeping, not much change from if you've been at a Rivers Trust conference before. We've got closed captions enabled on the Zoom webinar today, and you can enable those by just clicking the CC button, captions button at the bottom of your screen. And if you need to adjust the size, there's the little upwards arrow just at the edge of the button where you can do that. We would absolutely love for you to share your comments, your thoughts, say hello to each other, maybe where you're joining from in the chat box. But during our Q&A sessions, which are pretty much in every session today, please use the specific Q&A function because that will make it much easier for our session chairs to pick up on the questions, to know which ones are the most popular, and to make sure that your question doesn't get missed out as well. And then finally, the webinar is being recorded today. As audience members, you won't be on screen or anything at all, but we will be sharing the conference recording on our YouTube in the coming weeks for anyone who needs to catch up. And then just to quickly run through the agenda today. So we're going to start after a little bit of an introduction with the Rivers Trust 20 years on. And I'm really pleased that we've got Arlin Rickard, who is our founding CEO and our current Chief Policy Advisor, who's going to be telling us a bit of a story as we look back on this really special anniversary year. And then Arlin will be joined by our current CEO, Mark Lloyd, who will deliver his opening remarks. And then at the end of that session, we'll have just a little signal ahead to the theme of today, river buffers. After that, we'll go to a quick break. And then we're looking around the nations. So we've got representatives from all of the UK and Ireland to look at river buffers in their area. Then after, in the final session before lunch, we'll look at some of the key barriers to the wider implementation of river buffers and how they can be overcome. We've got a nice hour-long lunch break, and then we're going to be looking at empowering farmers and land managers for cleaner waterways, including through the use of river buffers. So that's a panel session, which I'm really looking forward to. Then after the afternoon break, we've got another panel all about beyond the buffer, piecing together mosaic habitats to look at the other things that we can be doing to help our water and the environment as a whole. And then to round off the day, another thing I'm really looking forward to, we've got some of our new Rivers Trust ambassadors delivering our closing remarks. So that's just a little signal of what's ahead. I am now going to stop sharing and ask Matthew to queue up our video, because as has become tradition, we have got some generously given poems from Poets for the Planet. So we've got two short poetic interventions today, which we're going to share for you now.
I start out small, sweat on a stone shelf shifting, a squirt sliding on its parent's craggy back. I surf off the hard rock with a splash, half singing, my throat thick with pebbles. Skin the shimmy of shine on a bed I don't sleep in for the thrill of my current. Full of flight, I come to a town, deep down bottles, tires, heavy metals. My life is crushed by green flowers. Breathless, I run darker, under steeples of trees, glad of rain, but sun-brushed, look, flashes of treasure. Rushing into the sea, I forget what I've been. While high on the snow-slick rocks, I'm just starting out.
Water Rats by Julian Bishop. We live on sedge and tenterhooks on the edge of chattering brooks, fur-flashed plops and a leftover odour of rotted apples, demure backdrop to a Sunday morning stroll. You probably think of us as rats messing about on the river, timeless creatures in a classic children's novel. Yet our numbers fall faster than snow in the wild wood, prey to mink, foxes. The wind in the willows turns yellow on bookshelves, perishes in attic boxes. We are rare as a badger's parlour, whitewash, a toad's vintage car.
This poem is called Rambling by Sarah Salway. This morning I'm in a trudge of boots, mindfully walking to the river where I don't have to swim, but will because no one makes me. Here's the thing about mindfulness. It makes you take responsibility for yourself. And sometimes I just want to be moss splattered with birdshit or stone, stuck in a cobweb of dying branches, unable to read the danger of death sign. Even those blackberries sweetening and canoes piled up like toddlers' crayons are things I choose to notice. How much more do I miss? My mind's a man in green corduroy telling me I parked my car wrong. Sod that. Today I am mindful of how what goes by me is grass growing hand high, patiently waiting to be ruffled. And Lord, I'm ready for ruffling.
Afterlife. I imagine joining the clouds in the sky. My body of water droplets will fall like rain onto people's faces. I will join thousands in a gravity rush downstream, a roller coaster twist over rocks, past fields and trees, and never get tired as the current pulls us on, all the way through sand dunes, across the final curve of the bay, before the waves' sudden salty taste.
This is Thames Path at Lambeth Bridge by Fiona Moore. Thames Path at Lambeth Bridge. Someone has taken a Jackson Pollock line for a walk, unravelling a white strand from his web of colours into a trail of drips along these worn paving stones. A swoop of splashes and then a jerk as the paint slops in its leaky can and the handle swings to start the next swoop. Like a shooting star that needs pit stops or the lamppost arc of embankment fairy lights. The drops grow heavier, then thin as if the paint's running out, then strengthen again. The line doesn't move aside for anyone on its straight course, and stretches far enough for doubt. Does it reflect the true physics of walking along with a leaky paint can? How could someone leak so much paint without knowing? Maybe this is graffiti or performance art, using the drip technique to map a public footpath onto this most public of paths, beside the river that's so much liquid contained. Here seed balls hang from the plane trees to make their own pattern. Walk under them, and it's the accidental paint spiller who leads you, walking in your direction, whichever way you are going.
So thank you to Poets for the Planet for that for those lovely poems. I'm glad that they're getting a nice response in the chat. So now I'm going to try and get our own creative juices flowing, and you'll be relieved to hear that this is not me about to ask you to write a poem. But what we are going to do, if I just switch back to my slides really smoothly, is we're going to do freshwater wildlife, wrong names only. And I've pulled in our marketing campaigns lead, Emma Brisdian, for this. She's the driving force behind so much of what's gone really well for the Rivers Trust in the last year. So hi, Emma, and thanks for coming on.
Hi, Becca, and wow, thank you for such a lovely intro. Yes, we thought it would be fun to see if we can get all of our creative juices flowing this morning, particularly after hearing that lovely poetry. That was really nice. And actually, I spotted one of these potentially in the poetry. I saw water rats pop up earlier, and I thought, maybe this could have been a contender for this game. So the premise of this is, yes, it's wrong answers only for sort of renaming our river species. And it's something that I've seen pop up online recently. It made me chuckle. It made Becca and I chuckle when we were sort of coming up with this. And we thought we'd put it out to all of you to rename some of our river wildlife. But sort of taking inspiration from the very blunt naming way that kids will sort of give names to things when they don't know the real names. They'll often give a very literal description of what something is. So my personal favourite is that, the lamprey. If you say lamprey to someone who doesn't know what a lamprey is, maybe they aren't necessarily going to know what it is from that name. But if you tell them it's a bitey river snake, I think they've got a much better picture of what that might be. So we thought we'd put it out to you for the rest of the day, but particularly now, get active in the chat. Let us know what you would rename some of your favourite river species, or what you think they should just be renamed as, because it says, does what it says on the tin.
Yes, so I came up with the frog, the jumpy, grumpy lizard, particularly in that photo there, which I love, and I have a real soft spot for grumpy looking animals. And a swan. I think I've seen this actually online somewhere before, so I can't take full credit. But I've gone for geese for people who shop at Waitrose. It's a swan. It's the an elite bird, you might say. So yeah, please do get sharing any examples that you have in the chat. Just put yourself in the mind of a primary school child. I think it's something that we should probably all do more often. And
get your little bright yellow welly boots on, go stomping around and start renaming some stuff. I really want to hear suggestions for things like bogs and wetlands. I think there's probably a lot of comedic value in those habitats. Oh, perfect. First one in we've got from Justin Leach, slimy water vampire. I couldn't agree with that more. What a horrible but accurate description.
Danger noodle though for the lamprey.
Danger noodle for a lamprey is very good. And kingfisher that's perfect. That does what it says on the tin. Dashing, diving, sapphire bird. That actually almost sounds like the start of a haiku or something. That's immediately taking me to the River Avon just near from where I live, where we always without fail see a kingfisher at some point. That's really lovely.
Yeah, Hannah, you need to finish that haiku, maybe during the breaks if you get a chance, although I know you're speaking later.
These are so good. The otter for the fluffy river rascal. I love that. Any use of the word rascal, excellent. Pink pinging invader for Himalayan balsam. Honestly, this is fantastic.
Binlets.
Binlets for bream.
Oh,
Hissalot for a swan. Excellent, Catherine. Yeah. I like that.
I feel like Catherine's one of probably many people who've had a slightly traumatic experience with a swan at some point in life. Oh, yeah, keep them coming in. This bin lids for bream is really, really tickling me. Giant hogweed, dinner plates on sticks. See, people are so clever. Kids are so clever when you try and put yourself in that mindset.
Yeah, I've got 2 young nieces, and sometimes when they're trying to describe something, they'll do that. They'll give things a name, or they'll point at it and be really literal, and you're like, that makes so much more sense than whatever obscure word we've since used to describe this thing. It's such a different way of seeing life in such a sort of pure descriptive manner. It's fantastic. I think it's really fun. I did think about one for floating pennywort. Could be small nope lily pads. I think that's what I would say to people if I saw floating pennywort. Bitey pond shark for a pike. Nice. Oh, you know what? Pikes are coming up quite a lot. Now we've got long green shark for pike.
Pikes are having a moment.
They
Pikes are having a
clearly
moment.
are. Yeah. Oh, Rebecca named her son
Sorry.
called Skeleton a bone lad. That's fantastic. A bone lad for a skeleton.
Very mad. Love that. That's
Very
like the
good.
other thing that you see online all the time with parents saying that their kids have said really profound things without even realizing. That's like bone mad.
I like that a lot. Oh, there we go. We've got some stuff in for Bogs. Excellent. Mud that farts. Well, it's not wrong. It's not wrong. I'd say that welly stealing mud that farts is very good. Or squelchy welchy land. Yeah, excellent. I like that a lot.
I love how sensory these all are. I also really like Tony's fluffy fish fetcher for the otter. Although you wouldn't want it, you could say something that would sound a bit questionable by accident with that one. That's quite a tongue twister. I realised as I was actually trying to read it out.
A little bit. Oh, for frog spawn from Jess. Forbidden tapioca. Yeah, that's excellent.
It's really good. Well done, Jess.
Very good. I mean, I expected there to be some good suggestions, but you're all smashing it out of the park. This is very, very good. I hope we continue this thread through the whole day. If anything pops up at any point, please do just pop it in the chat. No matter what the session, I want to hear it. I'm going to be eagerly devouring the chat, I think.
I'm loving these. The English graduate in me is loving all these alliterative ones. So the ducker and diver for the dipper from Paul. I really love that one. Oh, I think this is our first trout from Malcolm. Our first suggestion for trout. Pretty spotty fishy. Again,
so that's
not
good.
wrong.
That's very good. As someone who probably couldn't identify a trout without a book myself, I now know, I think, what to look for where I try to spot a trout. A pretty spotty fishy is excellent.
Oh, Emma, give it another year of working in the Rivers Trust. And I think we'll get you being able to identify a brown trout.
Yeah, true.
Oh,
we've got a joke in. Go on, you deliver the joke.
Marcus, taking things up a notch. Why do you call your newt tiny? Because he's minute.
Very good.
Good work, Marcus.
Very
You're
good.
ahead of the rest of the group. I love this. I'm also loving the ones that I'm not entirely clear which species we're talking about, but it could be many, such as Ella's angry bird.
Yeah.
Cover quite a few.
I do wonder if that's going back to swan. Oh, I like mayfly though. A short life in flight.
Oh.
Again, very poetic.
Yeah, that feels quite existential.
Yeah. Popping pink plant. Well, we all know what that is without even having to say, which is excellent. Like that one a lot. Again,
Blue
with blue
flash.
flash. We know we're talking kingfisher.
Quietly tail snorting mobile tattoo for water scorpion.
Wow, I don't think I know enough about water scorpion,
No.
but I'm now a bit terrified of them.
Yeah, that does make me want to Google them, which I'll do after the end of today, I promise. What have we got? Oh, I'm loving John's suggestion for the grass snake.
The stinky swamp sock. Oh, it's just brilliant. I can't add any notes to that. That's wonderful.
That has perfectly understood the assignment of putting your mind, like putting yourself inside the mind of a child. Oh, Tony, again, another good one. White broccoli mini tree for giant hogweed. I mean, that's just
good.
such a great image. I love it.
It's very good.
I love it. Any others, please keep coming them in. I think we've shown that you can't go wrong with a suggestion here, anything. I'm trying to think of others because even though I said I'm an English graduate, I think my imagination is actually shocking.
Yeah, I don't want to admit to how much time Becca and I spent trying to come up with examples for these.
Well, here's Justin's one for a stickleback.
Oh yeah, go for it.
So we've got blushing spiky aquatic punk.
That's cool, that is.
Yeah.
I like that one.
It's like the stickleback is the badass.
Yeah, I'm a fan of a beaver as well, so it's nice to see tree munchers coming into the chat like that.
Oh, some more good ones.
Oh, excellent. So lily pad, weedy green Pac-Man with flower on top. I mean, it's brilliant. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is.
And from Bert, the giant earbuds for reeds. Makes me slightly queasy as an image, but it's quite accurate.
I love the idea that a child might be wandering along a river and see something new, reeds, and think, what does that look like? It looks like my parents' AirPods. Yeah, I like that.
A bit.
Oh no, we've got a Better Beaver one. Gabs, excellent stuff. Construction water puppy.
Oh, that's so cute. Love
These
that.
are, like, hats off to all of you in the chat. This is even better than we imagined.
The collective mind has really come through for us here. Japanese knotweed from Michelle, zigzagging rhubarb minor.
That's very good. That's very good. For the bat, a large-footed flying hamster. Again, excellent.
Oh, Josie, I don't know if Rachel, who's our IT manager, is on this, but she is our resident bat enthusiast, and I hope she loves that. And she would definitely think that bats are very cute and fluffy, as are hamsters. I like bats. I think bats are cute.
Also, I do like that Rachel very often just send bat pictures to our Slack channel internally. I love it. I'm here for the bat updates all the time. Yeah,
if anyone needs a bat to be rescued, then contact Rachel.
We can hook you up. Yeah, nocturnal flat flaps. Oh, it gets better. It gets better. Very good. Jen.
I wonder if this is telling us who, not that I would want to assume anything, but who in the audience maybe has children and can just think of exactly what their own children would say.
Oh.
Nature's forbidden corn dog. There's a lot of forbidden.
Oh, for bulrush reeds. Very good, Lex. Yeah, I wouldn't want to try that myself. Toad spawn. Evil string of pearls on steroids. Interesting. That's fair enough. You wouldn't want to go into the water after that for sure.
Oh dear. Well, I think that has got our creative juices flowing, got our brains nice and alert for the rest of the day. We are going to move on just to finish this little opening to the day with another poetry video that Matthew's going to load up now. But thank you so much for all your suggestions so far. That was a really fun start to the day. But yeah, keep them coming. Thanks, Emma.
Where the river meets. We walk the grassy beach, push under cool swell, toes ripple cold, and I am a seal. We are water babies, up to air together, send sparkle eye drops to check we are still here. A silent solar-powered boat sails over bus stops and shops. Crumbled concrete carried by currents rebuilds the shore. Mud, not sand, fills the gaps between our toes. Our farm is a beachside rental. The river is an estuary. After waves we walk, insects buzz around the path. An ibis ignores us. Flamingos walk with backward knees. Water snuffles through their beaks. A rare pigeon hopes our breakfast will drop him crumbs. The ravens have gone, but we must get home before the heat.
Pharaoh's Island. She puts in opposite the Ite, where the common lawn slopes down to the bank. On the slippery decking of the private launch drops from plank to bench, through the willow's fringe, keeps close to the rushes and the dark tree roots that drink from under the waterline. She easily imagines the rest. Men and dogs and Waitrose bags, keys and hellos flung into the hall, floating back. The smell of blankets, kitchen drawers reluctant with damp, bottle openers, little whisks, the guests, the long and boozy lunch, the quick tide.
I'm Jacqueline Safra, and this is Sonnet 17 from my book, 100 Lockdown Sonnets. And it's from the 8th of April 2020. And it's about the River Thames, and it's also about sewage, because as you might know, they're building a super sewer under the Thames. A mist has settled on the Thames. The air is clearer than it's been for years. Inhale. Who knew that breath could be so beautiful? The stillness rings like something pure. A gown of water shimmers on the shore. I pause to hold this heaven. Then the pull of change upstream, tuneless bell of piling rigs, the underbelly of the river laid open, her hidden darknesses given to the poetry of super sewer. Unromantic, necessary, human waste and wastage managed by maskless men taking their chances for a living wage, the unsung heroes of our sunken age.
Last Thursday, my thirst bettered me, and I drank the Stroudwater Canal, all 8 miles of it down in one long swallow. I can't stop barking like the paddleboarder's spaniel, picking at the tail hair in my teeth. Once I'd got over the cygnet's egg, the trolley and milk-bottled mud, I choked on brick at Nutshell Bridge, tasted coal, lung tonic. The dust of widowmakers settled in the gunnel of a Severn Trow. Bow-hauled by ghosts, their coprolalia on my lips made me madder than a Stroud. My stomach founded on trade cloth, the theft of New World skin and bone. I got high on tea and opium. A Monte Carlo pleasure boat sailed my gastrointestines. All my depth perceptions gone. I've let the flock go to my head. Yet how is it I keep thirsting like the navigation's dead?
So huge thanks again to Poets for the Planet for that beautiful, quite eclectic collection of poems to start our day. And thanks also to Matthew from our team who edited those 2 videos together. It's just a brilliant way to introduce our conference. So now, as we've said, we're going to be reflecting a little bit, indulging ourselves just slightly, and marking 20 years of the Rivers Trust, and more than that, of the Rivers Trust movement. So I'm delighted to welcome Arlin Rickard, OBE, who is the founding CEO of the Rivers Trust, and as I say, current Chief Policy Advisor, who's going to take us a little bit on a journey of the Rivers Trust over the years. So Arlin, I think you are there. I will get you to come on now. And Arlin's got a little presentation that he's going to take us through, so I will leave it to you, Arlin. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'd like to really welcome you all this morning. It's wonderful for me to join you after a few years, and just to let you know that I'm still up and about and active in the background, and I'm just completely amazed by all the amazing work that everyone within the Rivers Trust movement does, but also, and it's never been more important, right across the whole environmental movement, and all my many friends throughout Wildlife Link and all the other organisations, campaigners and others, just extraordinary. And I take my hat off to you all in very difficult times. Now, I have the pleasure this morning of reflecting on a little bit about the history of the Rivers Trust and the wider movement, kind of where we came from. And this is my story as much as anything. So I'm telling it from my perspective. I forgive anyone for having a different sort of memory or collective memory. And of course, there are many, many stories and many threads that came together perhaps to form what we now know as the Rivers Trust movement. And certainly there are a plethora of extraordinary and exceptional groups that work right across that environmental field that embraces water, fisheries, and so on. So I'm busy writing a little bit of a history at the moment, and this is a great chance for me to celebrate 20 years of the Rivers Trust, but also 30 years of the wider movement. The extraordinary thing about all of these things is that we're at a time of great change, and I'll come back to that theme in a moment. Something we talk about in terms of shifting baselines. But the first thing I'd like to do is go right back to my early days. I began my studies at agricultural college, so I came into kind of the environment from an agricultural perspective. And the things that were concerning me way back now, because I'm a pensionista, way back in 1962, were things like Silent Spring, published by Rachel Carson. It's the first time we'd really had mainstream worries and concerns about that kind of post-war explosion of the use of pesticides and fertilizers and so on. We saw significant increases in abstraction and discharges of sewage for the first time, became aware of that. And of course, the intensification of agriculture. I became very much aware of in sort of the 80s and 90s, a beginning of the decline in salmon numbers, nothing like we have now, but we were concerned then. And that was a time when we were taking not just hundreds of tons, but thousands of tons from salmon from the sea in the North Sea net fisheries, where we were able to exploit the fish as they were completing their life cycle at sea. That ceased now. And by rights, we should see a huge explosion of salmon back in our rivers, but it's not the case. So it just shows how incredibly bad the situation is now. We had an alarming decline of birds of prey as a result of DDT, specifically, which once removed from the system and banned, allowed those birds of prey to come back, but they didn't have viable eggs. And we had a similar massive decline in the sort of 80s, 90s, of otters, and that was almost entirely down to aldrin and dieldrin, and to some extent polychlorinated biphenyls, PCBs. Again, when removed from the environment, otters very quickly came back. But again, there were these pesticides and products used in a range of electrical matters and in preservatives were killing otters or preventing them from reproducing. We had the appearance of invasive non-native species for the first time, things that we'd never come across before. There seemed to be a sudden increasing number of these, and including signal crayfish. And of course, they were actually introduced by government or MAF, saying that farmers could have them in their ponds as a sort of a sideline. Not a great idea. Similarly, American mink, which escaped from fur farms. We then saw this huge decline in water voles. We're still suffering from that now. Reductions in river fly hatches and pollinators. You know, the stories, and certainly when I was a child, when you were driving a car at night, your headlights, you did have insects all over the headlights and over your windscreen. And if you're certainly in the countryside, if you had a light on in the house and a window open during the summer, your house would be full of moths and bugs. No longer the case. So sad. But these things we're missing. Loss of songbirds, we're all familiar with that problem. And of course, there were a series of droughts in 1976 and later another one in 95. I was very aware of this massive change in the way that we saw movement in agriculture, particularly bearing in mind I was at agricultural college at the time, and production was the thing. Everyone was interested in increasing production at any cost. There was little talk of conservation. So we moved from permanent pasture and to intensive ryegrass. We moved from hay to silage, which completely revolutionized livestock farming, increased use of chemical fertilizers and pesticides. And the introduction of new crops like maize, which is proven, to be extremely damaging and still is. particularly where it's, I would suggest, fairly unnecessarily grown for digester plants. Move from composted straw-based sort of farmyard manures to slurry-based systems. This increased the pollution a huge amount. And larger farm units, we saw the small family farms disappearing as not being viable. And of course, new big heavy tractors and machinery and drainage, which was all funded by government grants. And the EA estimate we've lost 90% of our wetlands throughout England and Wales, and I don't doubt it. Of course, also back in '89, we saw the privatisation of the 10 regional water authorities. And the privatisation of these companies taking over water. This was a very big step at the time. We didn't know what it meant. And the formation of the NRA, the National Rivers Authority, now the Environment Agency, as kind of the regulator. And although it did unlock welcome investment, and in Cornwall, most of our sewage from our coastal communities went straight into the sea untreated, it did allow that investment. In South West Water's case, Operation Clean Sweep, and there were millions of pounds invested in the first few years in terms of putting in sewage treatment plants and extending those pipes out to sea and so on. That effort, if you like, has not been maintained. We've not maintained the infrastructure that we had, and we've ceased to continue to develop and improve infrastructure accordingly. So that's not worked out too well. But initially, there were quite a lot of advantages to bringing in this new private investment. I was also very conscious, and this was a big thing for us, the 1992 Rio Earth Summit. And we saw there for the first time, the Convention on Biological Diversity. They actually recognized climate change way back then, so they're ahead of their time. And we also had a convention on deserts and desertification. Now, back to my friend Ted Hughes. Ted Hughes was obviously the late poet laureate, a great angler, a great countryman, a very good scientist. His son went on to be a leading fishery scientist in America, spent a lot of time in Alaska. Ted was very concerned about the decline of our rivers in the Southwest in particular. The Tor was his favorite, but he fished the Tor, the Torres, the Tamar, the Dart. And of course, he was great friends with Henry Williamson, Tarker the otter, and he'd seen those otters disappear on the Dart pretty much. And the Tor in particular, where the whole story, Tarker the otter, was set. He'd been up to Scotland fishing. He used to go up there quite a lot and fished with the Tweed, and saw this new organisation that they're called the Tweed Foundation. And they were doing fisheries research. And he thought, well, why don't we have a kind of a fisheries trust down here for the Tor? So working with others, including Michael Martin and Lord Clinton, he put forward the idea of a River Tor Fisheries Trust, or a River Tor Foundation, and went to the Charity Commission, and that failed. It was quite a surprise to Ted as the poet laureate, but it failed for various reasons. And so we began a sort of a long period of discussion about how we might resolve that. And I became involved at this time, along with a great friend of mine and a great mover in this movement called Stuart Gardner. And we came up with the idea of something completely different. A trust for rivers, not just fisheries, not just fish, not just salmon, but a trust for rivers. And this was kind of building on a story, because an organisation called the Southwest Rivers Association, which was basically riparian owners, riparian interests, anglers, netsmen were allowed to be involved, and so on. It's quite broad. They formed in 1986, actually to review the green and white papers about privatisation of water. And of course, that privatisation of water came through in '89. So they kind of brought together for the first time all the riparian owners of the Southwest in a group, and we could discuss things. And working with that group, we were able to drawing on some of these ideas about what had happened in Scotland with fisheries, something that we could adapt for the Southwest, because it's a much broader issue. You know, the issue of the otters, the issues of the water voles, the the birds, a whole range of things, and these changes in agriculture, which were having massive impacts on our rivers down here. I mean, the Tor and Torridge are famous for having huge amounts of slurry literally running in there. We had fish kills on a regular basis. And so we set up a small working group, and with Ted Hughes and Stuart Gardner and myself, and we came up with this idea of West Country Rivers Trust, as we called it. Covered the whole of the Southwest. It was a broad environmental trust, and worked on a catchment scale and put rivers at the heart. We had to get a QC to help us tweak it, to challenge the Charity Commission, and we adopted this idea: if you look after the land, the river will look after itself. And this was the first logo that we developed, showing a kind of a food chain, and we continued to build around the idea of working closely with riparian owners and farmers, of course the NRA, now the EA, and the new water companies, because these were the tools that we had. We also employed the ecosystem approach for the first time, and the ecosystem approach was the tool that was developed within the Convention for Biological Diversity to deliver the convention. So it was the tools to do that, and there were originally 10 principles, later 12, and I'll come back to that in a moment. But these are guidance for ecosystem managers. Now, very quickly, we were so successful, and we started a project called the Tamar 2000 project, where we drew on European funds were available to us then. It was a £1.6 million project, so we were straight in the big time. And we did a lot of work on buffer zones, a lot of work on wetlands. We mapped all the wetlands in the catchment, and we began to do ecosystem services mapping. And we put all of our wetlands into hydrogeomorphic units. So we knew exactly, even back then in the 90s, how much denitrification was taking place, what they were gassing off, what carbon they were accruing. All these things we were already dealing with back then. So we're surprisingly far-sighted, and we work closely with the Wetland Ecosystems Research Group and others from universities and technical sources, including IGA, which is now Rockhampstead, to develop all these programs, and we applied them at a catchment scale, and it was really quite successful. We then started to get calls. I got calls as the sort of CEO of the operation saying, wow, this is great what you're doing. We've got a problem. We have a big pollution in our river, or all otters have disappeared, or we've got sewage in our rivers. What can we do? Can we form a trust like you? So using our now precedent deed with the Charity Commission, I would help them remodel the deed or adapt the deed to fit their own particular area, and the people involved, and what their prime mission was. And so by 2001, we had 4 rivers trusts effectively which were operating. Our old friends, the Tweed Foundation, still mainly focusing on the fisheries side, West Country Rivers Trust, of course. The Wye and Usk Foundation had formed, operating within the Wye, but really a rivers trust. But again, they'd drawn from the Tweed. They were particularly concerned about salmon on the Wye at the time, and the newly formed Eden Rivers Trust, which was very much modelled on kind of that West Country model, and later joined by the Ribble Rivers Trust. And we decided we'd never met all together, and really led by Ian Gregg. Greg's the Bakers, and he founded Greg's the Bakers, delivering bread himself originally and ending up as CEO and chairman of the whole operation. Ian Gregg was heavily involved in the Tweed Foundation, and later was the prime mover behind the Eden Rivers Trust. And we met at a meeting hosted by Stephen Marr-Smith on the banks of the River Wye, and the 4 of us got together. And I can remember saying to Ian, I'm being run ragged. I'm trying to run my own trust. I'm getting pulled all over the country, people wanting to know how to do this, and we're getting government policy people interested in what we do. How do I manage this? And he said, well, this is just like when I was developing all Greg's shops. He said, we've got a tiger by the tail here, and we've really got to find a way of dealing with that. We need to kind of franchise it. We need to form a group devoted to helping and supporting these new trusts, and we need to set ourselves a goal. And I said, well, what that goal be? And he said, well, we should cover the whole of England, indeed the whole of the UK and Ireland. Why not? And that was it. Ian became chairman of that group. I became CEO of that group. And for the first few years, I ran West Country on one hand and what we call the Association of Rivers Trusts on the other. And it was immensely successful. And little picture of Ian here on one of our many trips to Europe. So having developed this, we ran until 2004, and really it became too much. And also my board at the time at West Country Rivers Trust was sort of saying, well, you know, you're spending quite a bit of time on the wider association. You know, we've got lots of things going on here. Also, they had been hosting, if you like, the charitable or aspect of Association Rivers Trust within West Country. So 2004, we decided to make the Association Rivers Trust, or now the Rivers Trust, an independent charity in its own right, registered its name, and I had to make the decision, and I stepped down effectively from West Country and then exclusively operated within the Rivers Trust. And I've done that until 2019, when Mark has brilliantly taken over from me, and things have just grown exponentially since. Lawrence Coultrick took over after a wonderful spell with another great friend of mine, Dylan Bright, who we lost far too early at West Country. And again, we've all growing since. And of course, now Rivers Trust cover the whole of the UK and much of Ireland. So the timeline, you can see really going right back to probably, I would date it to the sort of South West Rivers Association, bringing together the riparian owners, sharing those concerns, and then the different projects and the formation of the groups as we went forward. So it's an extraordinary story, and I'm sort of trying to capture this and write up the history at the moment. Now, I just wanted to leave you with a couple of thoughts. One is about shifting baselines, and now I'm sort of in my dotage. I look at my son, and he doesn't recognise many of the things that I were familiar with when I was a young man or child. We really did have large numbers of salmon. We didn't think it was enough, but there was an abundance of salmon compared to now. We always had ash trees. We had elm trees then. We hadn't lost all of our elm trees. He probably wouldn't recognize an elm if he saw it. These things are called shifting baselines. And indeed, we can see generational shift, where each generation expects less and less. I mean, there's a picture here of a coot on a nest. If you knew no better, you would assume that coots make nests out of plastic. You know, I know they don't, because I've seen them before the plastic age, but you might be forgiven that now. These are shifting baselines, and we have very little, well, nothing really in the UK that we can say is a reference state or condition, so we can't compare it. So many things have changed, and each generation expects less and less, and we shouldn't. We should expect to be able to turn the clock back effectively, to have that abundance of wildlife and have those functioning, healthy ecosystems. So I would ask you not to aim low, but to aim high. You should expect that, and you should use all the data that you can, and old photographs indeed, to make the case that this is what we need to be returning to, not some lesser position. So institutional memory has a lot to do here, and interestingly, kind of to some extent, pre-internet and digitization of stuff, there were so many records and so many things which are still, you know, lying in filing cabinets here and there. So they need to be dug out, and we need to make a case, and we need to use the evidence to bring back our wildlife, bring back our animals, and to tackle issues like climate change. Don't settle for less. And the other is the issue around the 12 principles of the ecosystem approach. And I'm just going to pick on number one, which is ecosystem managers must recognize ecosystem is a matter of societal choice. And this is very important. As environmentalists, we may believe we're right, we may have the science to prove that we're right, and we may need to be very concerned about the need for change, but we have to carry society with us. So it may be, we've seen some breakthroughs recently in the case of the Swiss women who have taken a court to the European, or taken an issue to the matter of European Court of Human Rights, and they've said that governments have a duty of care to protect you from climate change, irrespective of how you voted. They have to do that. Well, that's an interesting development, and we may see similar developments elsewhere in the world. But here we have to work on government, and we have to work on society at large, and working and using those levers. We've really got to make some progress very quickly, because this isn't just a matter of what's nice to have nice to have the wildlife, or even a duty of care for wildlife and biodiversity. This is a matter of our own survival and our GDP, which they keep bleating about. But if we're wasting soils and fertilizers and energy, and if we're wasting effort, and if we're not capitalizing on our tourism and our wild swimming and our shell fisheries, and all these things, we're losing money as a society. It's costing us dearly. So it doesn't have to be like this. And I think the breakthrough on sewage, which has really broken through into wider society, is incredibly exciting development. And there are many other areas where we need to break through and get this being debated and discussed, every day of the week in the media and around people's kitchen tables. Not always the best subject matter, but it's very important that it doesn't need to be like this. And the next generation needs to know it doesn't have to be like this. So climate change is critical, and we'll be working around that. Of course, we'll be looking to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but something that isn't an option is resilience. And there's a very futile discussion at the moment about with farming resorting to saying, well, food security, should we have food security? Should we have be dealing with climate change? You have no choice. You have to deal with climate change. You'll have no food security without it. And winters like this, or summer droughts that we've had, will quickly tell you that. So we need to look at how we manage the land. We need to look at changing the cropping. We need to integrate the environment and these new nature-based solutions into our agriculture. So politics. We've had nothing but political churn since Brexit. That will continue and roll on, I don't doubt, and it will settle. But in the meantime, we have to really work on society. Now, I have a growing confidence actually in our green future. I live off grid, and I'm continually seeing through technical breakthroughs. When I see my first solar panel that I bought over 20 years ago, and the latest one, the efficiencies in the way that it's made, the amount of energy it now produces, and the fact that it's not using the same rare earth materials that it did originally, and the way the cost has come down, these things are telling me that we have a solution to this. And if you have power, if you have unlimited power, you have unlimited water, because you can desalinate if you need to, and you can grow crops in very successfully through aquaponics and so forth. So energy is going to be the key here, and we have this untapped massive amount of energy from the sun and the wind, and I have this great confidence in our future in that alone, and there are new developments all the time. So I'm positive, I look forward, and I'm so grateful to be here with you today, and look forward to your questions in due course. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Arlin, for the retrospective tour de force, and I mean also for everything you've done for the Rivers Trust movement over the past 3 decades. As we heard there, you've really been pivotal to all this. And I mean, I've said it before, and I'll say it again now, but without your determination, good humor, kindness, and diligence, the Rivers Trust network would not exist, and none of us would be here today. And I think, I'd pick out kindness in that, and I've stressed to the team all the time that we must keep that spirit alive that you've really created, like through a stick of rock, through the movement in your time. So thank you so much for that, Arlin. It's a great opener, and I now want to pick up the story where you left off, and I'm just looking for there we are, share screen. And my slideshow. So I want to pick up the story where you left off and talk a little bit about some of the achievements of the past year, and then cover 3 key programs of work which are front of mind for us. So looking back over the last 12 months, we had the big River Watch. We had 3,600 surveys were carried out by members of the public in October, and the next big River Watch is coming up. So mark in your diaries the 3rd to the 6th of May. And do keep an eye out on our communications for how to take part in that. We really want it to be like the big garden bird watch, and to have as big an impact on messaging as that. We had a celebration of 10 years of the catchment-based approach. Again, another product of Arlin's brilliance. And Minister Powell pledged government support for the catchment partnership network and more funding. We wait eagerly for news of that. We launched our State of Our Rivers report in the House of Lords and raised the plight of rivers further up the public agenda. We got a lot of great media coverage for that, and I think that was really helpful. We had a launch of the Chalk Stream implementation plan, which contained time-bound commitments to address flow, quality, and habitat in these really precious rivers. And we forged a partnership with British Rowing called Rowing Clean Waters, and trying to raise awareness of river health issues for recreational users, shortly before the Oxford crew lost the boat race because several of them have been sick. And we published our sewage map, which I think has really been instrumental in driving the debate on river health and has led to a £10 billion investment programme in combating combined sewage overflows in the next round of water company investments. We serve chemical cocktails to MPs in the House of Commons to highlight the issues of chemicals in our rivers, which don't get nearly enough attention, and as Arlin has said, are really prevalent and ever changing. And we had 3 new high-profile ambassadors who gave us their support. Professor Alice Roberts off the telly, Olympic and world champion rower Imogen Grant, who we're going to hear from later, and author and television presenter Dr. Amir Khan. And finally, the Rivers Trust network doubled its income over the course of 3 years, from 20 million to 40 million, putting us on track to meet our target of £100 million turnover by 2025. So now on to the future. And I think it's clear that, as Arlin highlighted, our current environmental management system is just simply not working. River health is flatlining, but in a wider sense, the Office of Environmental Protection has highlighted that the government is absolutely failing to deliver its environmental improvement plan. And the Committee on Climate Change has highlighted that the government has no credible plan for resilience to climate change. Nearly all the indicators, as we've just heard, are going in the wrong direction. So at the Rivers Trust, we believe passionately that a fundamentally different approach is required that addresses these monumental challenges of climate change, biodiversity loss, and river health in a far more integrated and holistic way, with nature and catchment-based solutions at their very heart. This involves restoring our natural ecosystems throughout our river catchments to slow the flow, purify pollutants, restore aquifers, and make space for wildlife. This year is the start of our Ofwat-funded £8.9 million programme of work with 20 partner organisations to identify the barriers to nature-based solutions and break them down. Nature-based solutions such as wetlands, as you can see here in Golderstorp on the left-hand side, but also woods, hedges, suds, meandering rivers, restored soils, they all offer a plethora of benefits to society, such as aquifer recharge, surface water storage, flood prevention, wildlife habitat, carbon sequestration, amenity value, community engagement, and public health. A treatment plant, like you can see on the right here, does improve effluent quality, but it delivers no other benefits, and it takes up valuable land. It emits vast amounts of carbon in its construction and operation, and anyone without a high-vis jacket and a helmet is excluded from the site. Despite numerous guidance documents from governments and regulators urging water companies to invest in nature-based solutions, they form a tiny fraction of the latest round of water company investment plans. So we really want to convert the warm words in the strategic guidance documents and make them a reality. The title of the conference is River Buffers, and river buffers are obviously a key nature-based solution. It's a great way of excluding livestock from rivers for starters, but they form natural nature recovery networks and perform a role to cool rivers. I saw some research which showed that a wooded section of river cooled the temperature of the water by some 9 degrees. We're going to need that in a changing climate. But they do play a role in purifying pollutants as well. We don't want to overstate that, and they do need to be a variable width to allow for dealing with the punch points where water can flow through them. But they also slow the flow and provide food for the growing beaver population. So our ambitious mainstreaming nature-based solution program sets out to challenge the status quo and drive the billions of those water company budgets towards nature recovery. But also we need to bring together multiple sources of funding if we're going to deliver this landscape scale change that we need. So water company customers don't pick up the whole bill. We face too many strategic challenges to address them one at a time, and they're too big for water companies alone to pick up the bill. So we need to join up water company investment with other large budgets for flood protection, agricultural subsidies, nature recovery, offset markets, corporate contributions, and even public health, if we're to have any hope of delivering the environmental improvement plan and ensuring the long-term resilience of our infrastructure. To quote Arlin, we need to gang up on the problems and solve them holistically and collaboratively, rather than playing a chaotic game of whack-a-mole. The Plan for Water committed to more funding for catchment partnerships, which, as I said earlier, we're still waiting for. But we feel that we also need to fill what we've identified as a missing middle of a regional coordination, where you can bring together large funds to pay for locally identified projects from catchment partnerships and deliver those national targets, one wetland, one tree at a time. This is set out in more detail at saswan.co.uk, which is an initiative we've been involved with Wessex Water. But more and better data is absolutely fundamental to underpinning this new approach. We require a massive increase in the quality and quantity of data, which needs to be available to the public in a user-friendly format, so that they can engage with and have ownership of the strategy. And we also need to be able to direct investment with greater confidence, competence, and intelligence, and monitor the impact of our interventions far better. So we've been running over the last 2 years the Catchment Systems Thinking Cooperative, which is a 3-year, £7 million Ofwat Breakthrough Challenge project, bringing together a huge number of partners from across the water sector to look at ways in which we can integrate multiple sources of data into a common framework, including lots of citizen science data, which has the great benefit of involving communities more in monitoring their rivers and engaging people in the subject. And over the coming year and years ahead, we're going to be looking for more resource commitments from the partners, but also for government and statutory agencies to really get on board and provide the long-term funding, so that we can move it from these demonstration catchments to business as usual across the country. And finally, I want to talk about our network support service. I've talked a lot about how we need to change the system. And this is because I don't think Rivers Trusts alone can deliver the scale of investment required to restore our catchments to good health. But Rivers Trust do play a crucial role delivering improvements at a local scale in partnership with local communities. Our central role at the Rivers Trust, as well as leading on national advocacy, is to support our member trusts practically. And over the coming year and years, we'll be stepping up our investment in driving an increase in the capacity and capability of our members to deliver, and to deliver at scale. This will be through coordinating regional and national funding bids, as we do at the moment, providing training and facilitating sharing of best practice throughout our network, and finding core funding and cash flow for our members, as well as providing centralized services that can help keep core costs to a minimum. So it's a bit of a whistle-stop tour through the present and future. And Arlin ended on a positive note, and I share that optimism. I think for three reasons. First is that the profile of rivers has never been higher, as we've heard. It has genuinely become an electoral issue now, and we need to convert that into intelligent solutions. But there is this growing consensus, I feel, around the need for nature-based solutions, for integrated systems thinking about how we manage our whole environment, not just the water within it. And the final reason, I think, is that the fabulous work of Rivers Trust is really starting to move the needle on the dial at a local scale. And we just need to grow that so that it can really make the strategic impact we would really all want to see. So thanks for listening. I think we've got a little bit of time for questions, probably 5 minutes for any questions. I can see a few popping up in the Q&A. Amy, I'm just picking yours first because I haven't had a chance to have a look at them. About advice for catchment partnerships. So 20 years on, and reflecting on the learnings and state of our rivers now, what advice would you give to catchment partnerships looking to make a positive impact on river health and conservation? What should be our current priorities, in your opinions? Arlin, do you want to have a go at that?
Well, it's wonderful to see the catchment partnerships recognised and highlighted here. I think the work that you do is just so important. I feel the ecosystem mapping is incredibly important, and obviously that also led into the story of natural capital. Now, difficulty is with government sort of maintaining these different concepts and ideas, but that was kind of, that is the financial way, if you choose to do that, to look at your catchment. The balance sheet being the natural capital, and your ecosystem services effectively being your trading account. So are you accruing capacity? Are you building carbon? Are you storing water? Are you building biodiversity? Or is it all being exhausted? Are you taking away in crops and erosion and sediments and the rest? So whichever tool or both tools, I think these are really helpful to help you understand your catchment. And then I do think about it, I think it's about bringing together society, getting the wider community on board with the big issues in your catchment. And that may be CSO discharges, it may be sewage treatment works, it may be agriculture, it may be something else. But I think we have to get society really engaged here, and then we can bring the political pressure required for change, and we need change.
From what I've seen of your work, Amy, you don't need our advice. You're doing a fantastic job. Natalie asked about a reference condition from abroad to understand what we're aiming for, and I would point to Denmark. Don't know about you, Arlin, but I think in Denmark they've really adopted this really truly integrated approach to managing water. So yes, that's what I'd say. Any additions to that, Arlin?
Well, I agree. Denmark, a country not dissimilar to us in many ways, climate and so forth, culture, agriculture, the rest. And they have done all the things that we haven't done. They've addressed the sewage discharges, they've removed barriers in rivers and watercourses, they've cleaned up their groundwater, and they've really dramatically changed agriculture and put them in a much stronger position. So they're a great advert of what we could be doing here. We're lagging behind. But America, surprisingly, because we only colonial America only got going a relatively short while ago, there are amazingly photographs and really good first-hand written accounts of what the wild was like. Those tens of thousands of bison, those the passenger pigeon, which we annihilated, once the most common bird in the world. Those there is reference condition out there still, but it's all under pressure from climate change.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. In America, they also have a truly independent environmental regulator, and they have got some, they are doing some really grand schemes to blow up dams and rewild river systems. And Marcus talks about the recognition of the impact of the policy of 1960s drainage schemes, which is what got me started when my river was straightened back in the 1970s. And I think, it's a really good point, isn't it? Because, it's one of those crazy things in public policy where we're spending a lot of money trying to speed water up and get it out of the land. And then we're spending other public money trying to slow it down and do natural flood management.
Absolutely. I mean, wetlands we now understand are so important. We've lost 90% of our wetlands in England and Wales, and they are such important drivers, everything from carbon capture to denitrification, just so many things, and they are integrated into the buffer zone story that we've been talking about, and understanding how those wetlands work, whether they're slope wetlands, foot slope wetlands, whether they're directly connected to the river. So the reconnection of rivers with wetlands as the natural buffers, and the restoration of that is incredibly important. And of course, we should be using ELM, environmental land management, grant support for farmers to help do that. At the moment, we're falling very short there too. So huge body of work to be done on policy to restore our wetlands, get them functioning, be great for farming, great for wildlife, and great for all downstream communities.
And allow the stacking of benefits on top of those ELMS payments from other sources. Haven't got a chance to answer all the questions, but I'll have a crack at answering them by typing. But we better hand over to Alex now to close this opening session.
Good morning all. Thank you for attending, and thank you very much, Arlin and Mark, for your inspiring words. And personally, Arlin, thank you for giving me a job. I realised yesterday it was my 7-year anniversary at Rivers Trust, so this all feels quite a special moment for me. I'm just going to share my screen. I've got a few slides to hopefully share with you, just by way of intros to today's session or conference about buffers. Hopefully you can see that. I thought I'd continue the theme that Arlin's touched on about standing on the shoulder of giants first of all, but also some of the history around buffers. I first became aware of the concept of river buffers or linear features or wildlife corridors, however we want to classify them, in 2010 when the seminal paper launched by Professor Lawton, Making Space for Nature, was launched. I think it's fair to say, and if anyone on this call hasn't read the paper, I'd highly recommend spending some time to read it. It's actually quite accessible. It's only about 80 odd pages. And it has really underpinned a huge amount of government policy and planning and thinking, and is really the basis for the local nature recovery strategies and indeed probably landscape recovery strategies as well. But that was 14 years ago, and sadly I don't think there's been really as much progress as we would have liked on any of the fronts. So as you can see here, the recommendation made public bodies, subsidiary undertakings, planning and management of water should make space for water along and wildlife along rivers and around wetlands. And despite ELMS, despite landscape recovery, despite 30 by 30, despite the 25-year environment plan, I don't think they've really made much space or progress in this, particularly the joining up space. There's been some good work around catchments, but actually, if we look at where we've come from and the history around that and where our policy has gone, we are not where we need to be. I spent most of my lockdown time speaking to Adrian Southern, James Wallace, CEO of Beavers Trust at the time, and Richard Higgs about this concept of riverscapes and how we can accelerate the adoption of riparian or habitats, with a focus initially on tree planting because that's where the opportunity was. But actually, how do we make it much easier at the point of delivery to establish, regenerate, rejuvenate our riparian habitats, and ideally create a network of river buffers along all rivers in the UK. We've made some progress. We've done a lot of thinking. We've realised how challenging it's been. particularly planting trees, although we've got about 1,000 hectares, unfortunately, it's not contiguous in the pipeline of development. But this concept in this fragmented world of policy, as Arlin alluded to, the kind of growing rhetoric about food versus conservation, how do we move into a space where we're really optimizing the land that we have to deliver the biggest bang for buck for the environment? And I'm absolutely convinced that those riparian habitats is that most valuable land. However, I think a cautionary note here, is it a potato or is it potato? Ultimately, it doesn't really matter, and we've lost a lot of time and effort, I would suggest, arguing over whether it's a living feature, wildlife corridor, river buffer. Ultimately, it's about the concept and it's about the vision. And how do we sell that vision, not just to us as the environmental sector, but to the wider public, to the policymakers and to the financiers? How do we make this a real concept, a vision for the future? A bit like the English Coastal Path, which I think has taken the best part of 16 years to almost finish off. But there was a vision which everybody worked towards, and it was a compelling vision that everyone got intuitively. And I would suggest that river buffers provide that same vision, the same opportunity for us and society. But how are we going to get from where we are now, and this was a quote from 2010, to where we need to be, will require vision, determination, and partnership. And I think that's what today is all about. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from all the other speakers. So on that note, I'm going to say thank you very much. Enjoy your coffees. I think we've got a 5-minute break.
Thanks, Alex. It's actually a bonus because it's a 15-minute break, or rather 30 minutes, as we've just run very slightly over at the end of this session. But yeah, absolutely. We'll be back at past with our look around the nations through the keyhole. So yeah, please take a comfort break, grab another coffee. I know I certainly will. And then just make sure to join the next session through the keyhole around the nations at 11:30. Thanks all.